closing in on a year.
This week's discussion, this is a weekly live stream where we sit down at the kitchen table and discuss things related and unrelated to regenerative agriculture. We'll usually start off with some brief introductions, and then we'll move into a topic for the week. The topic for this week is going to be calving. That's what we're in the thick of right now here on the farm, because we have a vast majority spring calving herd. And so we're just going to be answering going into detail, I guess, about a lot of things related to calving on the move and how to manage, troubles calving and stuff like that when you're moving your herd twice a day, because it's not like we lock our animals up at any point in time to address the calving situation and then just continue. Something coming in the window.
Something's outside.
Anyway, we'll just have a discussion about that, and Connor's going to have a bunch to contribute because he's had a good amount of experience at this point. We got him dropping out left and right. So anyway, we'll get into that, and then obviously some question answer, ask us anything is the best part about this whole session, and that'll open up after our discussion about calving. And it can be related to calving, any of those questions or topics or whatever, or completely unrelated. So we're excited to jump into it.
All right, without further ado, my name is Isaac Tapnan, this is Ben Hawley, and this is the newbie, Connor Helton. We're interns here at Green Pastures Farm, where we're interning under Greg Judy. He is the owner, along with his wife Jan. We run around 370 head of South Pole cattle, roughly 160 St. Croix sired hair sheep. We sell bale rollers. 2 weeks ago they forgot to say the guard dogs. We do sell guard dogs.
Yep. Livestock guardian dogs. We host grazing schools, farm tours, shiitake mushrooms we grow, a lot of different things. And so we're here learning what we can, enjoying the ride, enjoying the work and the crappy days sometimes, and the long days.
Yeah. And so it's good. We're loving what we're doing. So yeah,
absolutely.
Excited to have Connor on too.
Yeah, just split reaction. What did you think of this? This was your first full week. Yeah. What did you think?
It was. I mean, I loved it. Okay. It was a really long week.
Yeah,
especially the end of the week.
Yeah,
there was some things that went down.
So. we can get into that if people are interested. Ask a question about it. But it's a chaotic time of year. That's for sure.
Yep.
If you can make it through these 2 months and feel like you still have your head on your shoulders, you're basically going to be good to go for the rest of the year, because it's definitely a wild ride for the next 2 months. But we'll get into that because it all is related to calving season. So I guess let's just start off with what our calving window is in situation for people who aren't aware. You know what I mean, about how we manage bulls being separated versus when they're allowed to breed, that kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. So we do things a little differently than a lot of people here at Green Pastures Farm. So the bulls go in July 1st, and they remain in until March 1st. So what that means is anytime from April 1st all the way through December 1st?
No, it'd be December 1st, yeah.
December 1st, we can have calves. So that's our breeding window. Well, most people, they've got their breeding window 30, 40 days max. We kind of spread it out, but that being said, the majority of our calving is concentrated in the April, May, June side of that window. And so this time of year, it's like every day we're out there looking, here's dropping a calf, dropping a couple calves here and there. And so it adds to the...
Oh, yeah.
It makes it interesting.
Just to put it in perspective, if we had 125 calves tagged last year, so about 130 in total, because there's some that start to slip through the cracks, or we end up culling, or they end up dying or something like that. So we had about 130 plus calves, and 75 of them were born by the end of May. Yeah. So over half last year was born by the end of May.
And 96 of them were before August.
Before August, yeah.
So, and then it petered out after that.
Yeah.
Kinda.
So it's like a big spike, and then it tails out, and then
there's another little spike.
There's another little hump, in the end of the summer, early fall.
Mm-hmm.
But
that might change too.
Yeah, we're predicting, because last year was the first year that Greg had separated the bulls that way. They used to. Oh, there goes the light. They used to. They used to stay in all year round, and so 2 years ago was the first year he had separated them out for that length of time, meaning our first year, me and Isaac, our first year here was the first year he saw the repercussions of that window of removal. And so we had a lot of spring calving, and this year it's going to, I mean, they breed back early, and so there's this general shifting towards the spring. So we might be at like 90 or 100 by the end of May. You just never know.
I kind of hope we are.
Yeah.
Shorten it up.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It's like a Band-Aid.
Might as well rip it off all at once.
Yeah.
I'd rather have, I mean, if you're going to deal with 3 calves, you might as well deal with 7 calves in a day. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend the time looking for them.
Yep. And
Comb
just,
in the woods.
Yeah.
The thing is,
we're going to get into that.
So with the calves, which this is kind of like jumping ahead.
Yeah, go for
but it's so since we're moving every day and we're making a lot of cattle drives, once they get about a week or 2 weeks old, they're old enough that they can pretty much do anything, move any move. We don't have to worry about them. But it's those first 2 weeks that we're constantly making lists, making sure we got everything caught up, making sure no one's left behind sleeping in the cedar or whatever. And so if you can shorten that window, everything turns 2 weeks around the same time, and then you're kind of home free at that point. So and so it's when you have like a calf here, and then a couple weeks you have another calf, and then so you're always dealing with young calves on the cattle drives. That's what really is hard to do. So
and the reason why we wouldn't shorten that window in order to achieve that is because when you do that, it's just more time of the year that you have a separate bull herd, and having that one herd for the maximum amount of time throughout the year that you possibly can is just going to help so much with your recovery times. And that horsepower, that engine is bigger, so you get a lot more land impact and sort of ecosystem like regeneration potential when you have a herd that size. So
let's say another thing. The reason it's so spread out too and not more concentrated, it probably will be 10 years down the road it's going to be more concentrated. The reason it's so spread out is, was it 3 years ago? 2 or 3 years ago, Greg was just leaving his bulls in 100% of the time. They were always in there, so he's getting calves all year round, and that worked for 4 years for him or something. And the last 2 years that he did it, both winters, he had like 20 calves born in January in the middle of a snowstorm and lost like almost all of them. And so that like really put a sour taste in his mouth. And so that next spring he separated out the bulls in March and started doing that. And so last year was the first year we saw the impact of that. And so it was definitely highly concentrated in April, May, but it was spread out. We're expecting this year it's going to be even more concentrated in April, May, and then be less spread out, and then in
long after we're gone.
in the next years it'll be even hopefully even more concentrated to where maybe someday it's like it is a 30-day window, and you can leave the bulls in there 6 or whatever, not 8 months out of the year.
Because once they're bred, they're bred.
Right. You don't have to worry about it. So you might as well leave the bulls in there. But
so why don't we just cover because really the crux of the issue and the crux of the chaos, I should say, when it comes to spring calving with this kind of system that we've got is that we're moving the animals twice a day, and in the spring the grass is growing as fast as it does. Because if you're interested in managing for the spring flush, we did a whole live stream on that a couple weeks ago, so go check that out. But if you're managing for the spring flush properly, you're moving your animals as fast as you ever do in the entire year. So you're covering ground. Like we'll go around the entire farm rotation in sometimes as short as about 30 days. And so that means there's a lot more movement and a lot more drives and a lot more walking. And when you've got mothers that are trying to calve, it's antithetical. Like the two of them do not mix very well. And so the question then becomes, all right, if you've got a spring calving herd for a lot of beneficial reasons, how the heck do you manage it with moving them that often?
Because the calves don't like to move.
Because the calves don't like to move, and the mothers are trying to calve, and then you can't find calves in certain paddocks, and like how do you manage all that? And I guess let's just break it down really simple about what do we do like even before we even like go into a paddock, you know what I mean, to like make it easier on ourselves, that type of a deal.
I mean, like once they're in there.
Yeah, or just when we're planning it out, like what we were doing when we were sitting down there. What do you wanna chime in about like what we did? When we were sitting down trying to plan out where they went, like there were certain things that we were doing to make our lives a little bit easier.
Right. Yeah, and I mean a big thing we talked about was, we don't want to make these super long drives with a bunch of new calves, and so just making sure that I know we at one point we were planning a really long drive, and they were like, we're gonna have a bunch of calves, so we're gonna actually park them in a separate paddock that's not as far, so that because we are going to have calves, it's like they don't have to go
the full
that
distance
far, because
break it up for 2 days or whatever.
Because at that point we're gonna just be carrying. There's gonna be too many calves to carry. To get them to the next paddock.
Yeah, because they get tired. Like when they're little, when they're little guys,
especially 2-3 days old. Like they're not conditioned to walk a mile up and down these rucker hills.
Yeah, that's for sure. So that's definitely a big one is planning those drives accordingly, and if you can split them up.
Another big one too is like some paddocks we have part of like half the paddock is like timber or something or brushy overgrowth or stuff that's easy to hide in, and so a lot of times going into a paddock, we'll fence those completely off so that the cattle can't get in there. They can't get in there and calve. We don't have to worry about walking in there and looking for cows that had calved. We just have the peace of mind of knowing they're in the paddock and we can see where they're going to calve at. And so that's a huge one too.
I would rather set up twice as much fence to not have to be like combing woods and thorn patches and boggy areas and stuff for calves. It's just, it takes more time and more posts, and sometimes that's not a luxury, but man, it's worth it in my opinion to try to fence them out. And then there's areas even that we won't even touch. Like we were originally planning on going to a particular farm and hitting it right now because you want to get it before the grass starts to get too lignified, and we just decided, know what?
80% timber.
80% timber, that paddock in particular. And so it's too many places to hide. We can't fence all of it off. So we're better off just skipping it, and we'll come back to it on the next rotation when we have a lot more older calves. And maybe it'll be a little more lignified, or it'll gotten a little bit away from us. But
the nice thing about that paddock too, though, is that paddock we skipped, it has a lot of big blue stem, which is a warm season grass, and so hopefully the next rotation, whether it's May or June, that big blue stem is going to be 6-8 inches tall, and that's going to be exactly what they're going for at that time, and it's going to be primo forage. Like the fescue might be a little bit tall and lignified, but underneath they're going to have all those warm seasons there to eat as well. So that was made the decision a little bit easier too.
Exactly. So those are really like the precursors that you would be looking for before you even start moving or start going to a certain area of your farm. Look at your drives and how long you're going to be, and can you split them up? Look at those paddocks that you're going to that are extra brushy or have a lot of hiding spots. Can you fence that off, or is it just so brushy you don't even want to touch it? And sometimes that's the best option. So that's what you do before you even get in there. Now you're in there, right? And mothers are calving left and right, and you have to make moves. Like, what would you do if we made a move and a mother didn't have her calf? Like what's the thought? There's sort of a thought process we'll go through depending on the situation.
So say we know she calved, we saw her calve that morning, and then when we moved her in that paddock, we saw she calved, and so the evening we were getting ready to move. We moved the mob. We noticed she's in the paddock with the mob, and their calf's nowhere to be found, probably laying down in the other paddock. What we would do is, if we have the luxury, just leave. Don't leave any back fence. Just let them be able to go back into the old paddock, so that the mother on her own can go back in the night, get the calf caught up with the mob. That's going to be so much more efficient than you us trying to go walk around looking for calves that blend in like a baby fawn. I mean, you got to basically step on it in order to find it.
It's incredible. You'd think you could find it.
Yeah. Especially if you haven't tagged it yet.
We wasted so much time doing that.
Yeah. And so that's a big one. If you can leave no back fence, your cows are going to do the work of because the cow wants to stay with the mob. The mob is a protection for her and for her calf. Coyotes aren't going to mess with the mob, and usually big predators, even like wolves and bears, aren't really going to mess with the mob too much. Just because it's like such a big
intimidating thing.
And so she's going to want to keep that calf as close yet away from the mob as she can. So if you can leave a empty back fence, no back fence, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't leave a back fence. Let her do the work, and it'll save you so much headache.
Yeah. If you have to put a back fence in, and she doesn't have her calf, you're better off leaving the mother behind and sorting her off, leaving her back there, moving the mob into the next paddock, and then waiting. Usually in the morning is when they'll have them. In the evening, they typically like to hide. And so in the morning, the next morning, go and check early before it gets too hot, especially later in the summer. And 9 out of 10 times they'll have the calf the next day. And when she's got it, then just let her into the next paddock or drive her separately across the road or whatever. That's the best case scenario, because you can try to sort the mother back and then watch to see if she'll go get the calf, but there are so many times where they know you're watching, and so they'll just lead you completely astray. They'll go and stand in the opposite corner that the calf is and just be bawling her complete head off over there.
So if you sort her back and she doesn't go immediately to the calf, within I would say 10 minutes, just let her be. Don't even try to follow her around longer than that. She'll just play the games with you. And believe me, they've tricked us a lot.
So many times.
She's leading us to the calf. Nope, she's just walking probably on the opposite side of the paddock.
So. Yeah, and definitely there's a risk that, because the calf is being left unattended, that it could get picked off by something. And we can say that, of all the times we did that last year, it might have happened once and we don't even know that for a fact.
Yeah, we don't know that for a fact.
So
we don't know for sure.
Yeah, what happened to the calf? Yeah.
I would say that we didn't have any
that got picked off. And so eventually what ends up happening is the calf gets old enough that it's like, screw this, Mom, I'm not hiding in the brush anymore. and so it's just up playing around with the mob and likes to play with the other calves. And so
it's usually the first 2 to 3 days that they hide.
Yeah, and sometimes it's longer. Sometimes they'll be stubborn.
Oh, like that 080.
Yeah.
She was hidden for 6 days.
Almost a week. And we were thinking
she was dead.
She was dead or something, and we ended up, and the mother was keeping her up.
We had No, she wasn't. We had her sorted.
Oh, I thought the one in Venus's is what I was talking about.
Oh no, I was thinking. Remember, she we thought she was dead for sure.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, there's no hope, and so we left the mother with a bull calf or something back there with it was a bull. It was one of the older bulls, and we're like, yeah, that calf's dead, and we finally just. After 2 or 3 days, we go back there, and Greg's like, you might want to just go down and check on her just to see if she has her calf. We're like, okay, but we were thinking she's dead.
Not going to have it.
We get there, and there's just this little heifer calf walking around,
yeah.
Oh my goodness. And so we got her in the weaning pen, and we were able to get her back with the mob, but it's
it's just crazy. They know exactly where they are.
We had all the gates open in the previous paddock so that she could go anywhere that we thought it was.
And for the last 3 or 4 days.
But we're like, I don't know where it is. We were clueless. But.
So that's a big one. That's a huge one. Let the mothers do the work. You got to trust them more than sometimes you would like.
Because they're smart.
They are smart.
There's the occasional one that's just stupid, but I would say the only was that weird time that we had. Yeah. Other than that, every other time, the mother knew exactly where the calf was.
And you need to be attentive, because there's a difference between a mother that's hiding her calf and a mother that's abandoned her calf. And so, they act differently, and that's just something that you sort of have to develop a sense for. But also, you can look at the udder and sort of sometimes that's even hard to tell. They produce a ton of milk. They just get really tight udder. Really tight udders,
especially when it's a young calf.
Well, especially when it's a young calf that's not drinking that much, and so it'll happen really quick, and you're like, oh, the calf's not getting anything to drink or anything to eat or whatever. But it's just getting a little bit. And then sometimes you can tell if she's got a smaller udder, it's a really robust calf. It'll milk out one of those teats, and you'll notice that that one teat is not filled like the other ones, and there's something sucking on that. And so that she's probably taking care of it. But if she's just not chock full of milk
and just not paying any attention to you, or the big thing is they'll pay attention to you, because as soon as you go in the paddock, you're a predator. And they're watching you to make sure, oh, you're not gonna mess Junior up, are you? You're not gonna hurt my calf.
Yeah.
So they're watching you. They may not be paying attention to their calf, but if they're looking at you, that's a good chance that they're aware that they have a calf, and that they're, even if you don't see it anywhere around, if they've got it hid. But if they're just don't even pay any attention, they got a tight bag, and they which some of them are just less attentive, and that's just part of the way they are. But it's part, like you said, part of feeling it out and
and understanding,
learning.
And if a mother's not paying attention to her calf at all, and the calf, if you find the calf and the calf is really thin, you can tell that its stomach's not full, it's not licked off or something like that. That's a situation where you need to get that mother into a corral at the very, like, as soon as you can, because the calf is probably not going to live much longer.
Get her into the corral, hopefully in a head catch, and try to, let the calf nurse, get the calf up there, make the calf suck, which the calf will want to suck because she's.
But sometimes they're too weak, depending on how long they've been there.
So a lot of times you gotta get your finger in the mouth, get them to start sucking, and guide them to the teat and everything, and do your best to get that milk inside them, because that first 8 hours after they're born, if they don't get the right colostrum or nutrition, it affects them for the rest of their life. That first 8 hours is the most critical point in that calf's life as far as how they're going to perform
developmentally down the road, for sure. And we have mothers that don't take the calf. That happened to us a decent amount last year, and it's just something that you got to deal with. I mean, I remember when we started talking about that in live streams a long time ago, people were like, "Man, I thought Greg's stuff just went all perfectly all the time." But it's one of those situations where it's not a time when you want to be pulling out a video. So
we don't take many videos.
We don't take videos of that kind of stuff, but it happens.
It'd be good to. It'd be good to show that, just for the transparency of it, and that's what talking about it right here helps too. Is we have troubles just like any other cattle rancher. Maybe Greg's figured out a lot of solutions to a lot of problems, and so maybe it runs a little bit more streamlined, but there's always going to be issues. That's just part of the job title is adapting and overcoming the problems that arise. So
if you got a mother that doesn't take a calf, you just have to be persistent with that mother and that calf in the corral for up to a week or more, and depending on how long it takes. But there's some that are just so stubborn and don't get it that you can just tell they're just going to be kicking and headbutting their calf, until the cows come home, no pun intended. And that's one that you're just going to have to sell, because you can't afford to have a mother that doesn't have a mothering instinct to her calves. The only ones that we'll give a break for, with ones that are, incredibly difficult to deal with as far as mothers are concerned, are first calf heifers, because sometimes they just don't get it. They're a first-time mother. You give them a little bit of a break. But if it's older cows that just continuously keep abandoning calves and not paying attention and butting their calves and for no reason, it's a good candidate for a call.
There's an old saying that goes you think God would have designed a better way for a calf to come into the world than through a heifer?
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny thing.
Because older cows, they just get it for the most part.
But the reason they get it is because they've
done it.
A heifer's never done it, so it's kind of expected that she's not going to get it.
And it doesn't happen every time. We have some heifers that are incredible mothers, but there's a lot of them sometimes that aren't, and you just have to deal with it. You got anything to add as far as stuff that you observed with the calving situation, or tagging, or anything in general?
The big thing is just you got to know when to be urgent and when to be patient.
Yep.
You can get all worked up and she doesn't have her calf, and we need to get her sorted back, and we need to get this figured out, and try to use your hand,
use your management get it done.
Work it out. And it's if you just be patient, put a little trust in the cow, as long as she's paying attention to you, or showing some signs of interest in the calf, like licking the calf, mooing to it. More often than not, she's gonna be fine. But then there's also times, say you've got a calf that it's cold and rainy or something, and it gets a little bit of hypothermia. You need to get that calf in and try to help it, or try, if it's really far gone, try to save it at least, and then do your best to to do all you can. And that's obviously in our context too. You know what I mean? We can be pretty hands-on at a level of 379 head in total. But obviously, we don't know, because it's the experience that we've got. But I'd imagine if you've got herds of
much larger than that, 600, 700, 1,000, you're just not going to be able to have that kind of attention to each individual calf. But that's something that I'd be super curious about to get into a discussion with people. If there's people on here who run big operations and they have methods.
The quantity, or what's the right word? Quantities of scale?
Economies of scale.
That's what I was looking for.
Because maybe you lose a couple more calves as a result because you can't be as attentive, but the percentage is smaller because you have more calves every year. So anyway, that'd be an interesting discussion to get into. But Connor, you got anything to add that you've observed in your first week?
Yeah,
it makes it a lot more interesting.
It does. Like every morning and every evening you go out there and you're like, okay, we gotta, be on alert.
Yeah.
Is there a new calf? And we're trying to move. And,
we had one this evening, a new one.
Yeah.
So you gotta be ready for that. I think something I've seen both of you guys do a lot is you're always looking for cows that are like really close to calving.
Yep.
And that way, because you don't want to like go near the cow when they're about to calf or when they've just calved. And so if you have an idea of what cows are very close and what like when they're probably about to calve, you can kind of narrow it down of,
like
okay,
from a distance.
It's probably that cow or it's probably this cow. Because if you have those numbers in your head and you kind of know what they look like, it's like that kind of look like, whatever, like 503 or 511 or whatever.
Yeah.
So just
tell,
so
that's
just being
a big one.
observant of that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, for sure. And right now, it's not as. So later in the summer, when we don't have as many that are calving, we'll actually write down lists of numbers that are close. And so when we do find a calf dropped in the pasture, and like you have a short list of mothers you can go and look at to try to figure out who it was.
And a lot of times you can tell. Who it is, like if she has like not abandoned, but if she's not with her calf, you can look
she's trying to fool you.
Like, oh yeah, she's calved.
But right now there's so many that it's not worth writing lists down. It's more just you're eyeballing them and saying, oh, she's super close. Oh, she's close, but not as close as she is, or whatever.
So close.
We have one heifer that literally looks like a cat, like a calf could come crawling at her any minute.
This sounds gross, but like a burn boil.
Yeah.
That's how like
it's just
puffy
so,
she is.
Her vulva is just incredibly puffy.
She is so close.
Which is great because when it's like really loose and floppy, like that there's probably gonna be a hallway sized opening for that cat to come
plenty of room.
Let's knock on wood, everybody, please. But sorry about that. That was probably vibrating the deal. But anyway. I think that's a good discussion. We cranked that for a while. I'm sure we got a gazillion questions.
Yeah, that's a really deep topic.
And we could keep going and going because it's the lifeblood of your operation is your calves. I mean, if you don't have calves, you're out of business. So dealing with that is probably the most critical time of the entire year. But